The earth out here doesn't forget, it holds on to things. A dropped button, a broken wheel, a footprint washed away by rain. And sometimes it holds on to the weight of a man's choices. My name is not important, not anymore. But the man I was, the man I became on a stretch of dry land in the Wyoming Territory, that man still walks beside me some nights, in the quiet, when the wind sounds less like wind and more like a voice. This is his story, and mine. It begins in the spring of 1873. I was a wagon master. Name was Elias Cole, 34 years old, but looked 50. The sun had carved canyons into my face. My hands were thick with calluses from ropes and reins. I'd led 5 trains from Missouri to the Willamette Valley before. Lost people on every one. A child to fever. A man to a snake bite. A woman who just gave up. Sat down in the dust one day and wouldn't get back up. You learn to carry that. You have to, or you don't survive. The train that year was small. 7 wagons. A mix of farmers and fools. Mostly. Families chasing a promise they'd only read about in newspapers. They'd sold their farms back east for a dream, and they put that dream in my hands. I remember the first night. We camped by the Kansas River. The water was high. The air smelled of wet earth and hope. They gathered around the fire, faces lit by the flames. Faces lit by the flames. Children laughing. A man named Silas played a fiddle, a little off-key, but it made the women smile. And then there was the Thatcher family. Joseph Thatcher was a preacher, not the fire and brimstone kind. A quiet man, thin. His hands were soft, meant for holding a Bible, not a plough. His wife, Ruth, was small, with tired eyes but a strong jaw. She carried their future on her back. A baby due in the autumn. They had a daughter, Margaret. She was 7 years old. She had hair the color of wheat straw and eyes that were too big for her face. The kind of eyes that watched everything, that saw things the rest of us missed. She walked up to me that first night while I was checking the oxen's hooves. Stood right behind me. I didn't hear her coming. "Are you the one who makes sure we don't die?" she asked. I turned, looked down at her. Most children were scared of me. My voice is deep. My face is hard. But she just stared. I knelt down. "I'm the one who tries," I said. She nodded, like that was the answer she expected. Then she walked back to her family. I watched her go, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A weight, a responsibility that went beyond the contract I'd signed with the adults. It was her. Those eyes. The first weeks were good. The prairie was green. We followed the Platte River, the water wide and shallow, like a muddy mirror for the sky. We made good time, 15 miles a day, sometimes more. I taught the men how to yoke the oxen properly, showed them how to scout for high ground before setting camp. Joseph Thatcher listened carefully, but he wasn't built for the work. His hands blistered, his back ached, but he didn't complain. He prayed. Every morning, before the wagons rolled, he'd stand by his wagon and say a prayer. Quiet words carried away by the wind. Ruth would stand beside him, her hand on her growing belly. Margaret would stand behind them, her eyes on the horizon. She started following me, not in an obvious way, but when I'd walk to the front of the train to scout, I'd sometimes see her, perched on the seat of her family's wagon, watching. When I'd check the stock at night, she'd be there, sitting on a rock, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. One evening, she asked me, "Did you ever have a girl?" I was sharpening my knife. The sound of stone on steel stopped. "No," I said. "Why not?" I looked at her. Didn't have time. She thought about that. "My pa says you have to make time for the things that matter." I grunted. Didn't have an answer for that. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to name my doll after you." I looked at her. She was holding a rag doll. Its face was stitched with black thread, a simple smile. 2 dots for eyes. It was worn. The fabric was faded. That's a boy's name for a doll, I said. She doesn't mind, Margaret said, and she walked away. That was the moment. The moment she got under my skin. I didn't know it then, but she planted something, a seed. And out here, on the trail, seeds are precious, because most of them die. We hit the first real trouble in Nebraska. A storm came out of the north. Not rain, hail, the size of eggs. It came without warning. One moment, the sky was blue. The next, it was grey and screaming. The oxen panicked. Wagons lurched. Children screamed. I rode through it, yelling, trying to calm the animals, trying to get the wagons into a circle. One of the wagons, a man named Harlan, a drunk who'd lied about his sobriety, hadn't secured his sobriety. The canvas ripped. Barrels broke loose. The oxen bolted. I watched the wagon tip. It didn't fall all the way, but it tilted, and Harlan's wife, a thin woman named Cora, was thrown from the seat. She hit the ground hard. I heard her arm break from 20 feet away, a sound like a wet branch snapping. We got the train circled, got the animals tied down, but the damage was done. Cora's arm was shattered. I set it as best I could. Splints, whiskey for the pain. But infection was a fear that lived in every wagon. A broken bone could mean death. A fever could take you in 3 days. Harlan sat by her, his face pale, his hands shaking. Not from grief, from need. He'd lost his whiskey in the storm. I could see it in his eyes. The shakes were starting. I pulled him aside that night. "You drink again. You put this train at risk. I'll leave you at the next fort," I said. He laughed. A dry, hollow sound. "You'd leave a woman with a broken arm." "I'd leave a man who can't be trusted," I said. He stared at me. There was something in his eyes, a darkness, not anger. Something worse, resentment, the kind that grows in a man who knows he's failing and blames everyone else for it. I should have watched him closer, but the trail demands your eyes be forward, always forward. The days turned to weeks. We crossed into Wyoming. The prairie turned to high desert. The grass was shorter. Water became scarce. We followed the Sweetwater River, but it was low that year. The animals grew thin. The people grew thin. Joseph Thatcher was struggling. His faith was strong, but his body was failing. He'd lost weight. His cough had started in Nebraska, and by Wyoming it was deep, wet. Ruth would look at him with fear she tried to hide. But Margaret saw it. She started helping more, carrying water, gathering buffalo chips for fire, small hands doing a woman's work. She never complained. But I saw her watching her father, the same way she watched everything. And I saw the worry in those two big eyes. One night Joseph came to my campfire. He sat down slowly. His breathing was labored. "Elias," he said, "if I don't make it, you'll make it." I said. It was a lie. We both knew it. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. "If I don't, you'll see them through. Ruth, the baby. Margaret." I stared into the fire. The wood crackled. A spark flew up into the darkness. "That's not my job," I said. "I get the wagons to Oregon. What happens after? I'm not asking you to marry her," he said, and a ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I'm asking you to keep them alive, to get them to a place where they can start again." I didn't answer right away. The weight of his words settled on me. It was the same weight I'd felt the first night, when Margaret looked up at me. "I'll see them through," I said. He nodded. He closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he was gone. But then he took a breath, stood up, walked back to his wagon. 3 days later, Joseph Thatcher died. It was morning. The sun was just rising, painting the rocks red. Ruth's scream cut through the camp like a blow. "Aid!" I ran to their wagon. Joseph was on the ground. He'd been standing, praying, and then he just fell. His Bible was open beside him, the pages fluttering in the wind. Ruth was on her knees holding his head, sobbing, and Margaret stood a few feet away. Her arms were wrapped around herself. Her face was pale, but she wasn't crying. She was staring at me, the same way she'd stared that first night. Waiting, asking without words, "What do we do now?" We buried him that afternoon. No wood for a coffin. We wrapped him in his bedroll. Silas said a few words. He wasn't a preacher, but he did his best. I dug the grave myself. The ground was hard, rocky. Each shovelful was a battle. When it was done, I stood at the edge of the grave. The wind was blowing, carrying dust that stung the eyes. Ruth stood beside me. She didn't say a word. She just held Margaret's hand. I looked at the grave, at the man we were lowering into it. A good man, a quiet man, a man who'd asked me to do the one thing I'd spent my whole life avoiding: care. I was good at surviving, at leading, at making hard choices. But caring was a luxury. Caring was a crack in the armor that let the grief in. I looked at Margaret, and I made a choice. I'd care. The trail got harder after that. The Sweetwater gave way to the Continental Divide. We had to pull the wagons up slopes so steep the oxen strained and bled. We lost 2 oxen to exhaustion. A wagon had to be lightened. Furniture, books, a mother's hope chest, all thrown to the side of the trail. We rationed food, half rations, then quarter rations. The children's faces grew thin. The adults moved slower. Ruth Thatcher was a rock. She didn't complain. She drove her wagon with a quiet determination. She'd learned to yoke the oxen, to check the wheels, to do the work her husband had done. But her body was changing. The baby was Ming, and she was getting weaker. Margaret never left her side. She'd ride beside her on the wagon seat, handing her water, wiping her brow. She'd stopped asking questions. She'd stopped drawing in the dirt. She'd become a small, silent engine of survival. And then Harlan, the drunk. He'd been quiet since Cora's arm healed. Too quiet. I should have seen it. The resentment, the hunger in his eyes when he looked at our supplies. It happened at Fort Bridger. We stopped to resupply. I'd traded some hides for flour, salt pork, ammunition. I'd secured it all in my wagon. The one wagon I kept separate. The one with the supplies for the whole train. That night I woke to a sound. A creak. The shift of weight on a wagon bed. I grabbed my rifle, slipped out of my bedroll. The moon was bright. I saw him. Harlan. He was at my wagon. The canvas flap was open. He was inside. I walked up quietly. I could hear him moving things. The scrape of a barrel. The rustle of canvas bags. I pulled the flap back. He was crouched over a sack of flour. His hands were covered in white powder. His eyes were wild. He looked like a feral animal caught in a trap. "Harlan," I said. My voice was low, calm. He froze. Then he turned, and I saw it. The bottle in his coat pocket. He'd traded something for it, probably our bacon grease, or the bullets. "You're stealing from the train," I said. He stood up slowly. His hands were shaking. "We're going to die out there," he hissed. "You're marching us into a desert. We need supplies." "We have supplies," I said. "If you take them, others go without. Children go without." He laughed. That same hollow laugh. "Children. You care about the children now. The great Elias Cole, the man with no wife, no children, no life. You think you're a hero because you drag a few wagons across the prairie." I didn't answer. He stepped toward me. He was bigger than me, but he was weak. The whiskey had hollowed him out. "You're not leaving me behind," he said. "You try, and I'll tell them. I'll tell them what you did. Back in Missouri, before you became a wagon master." My blood went cold. He saw it. A smile spread across his face. "Yeah, I heard about you, Elias Cole. The man who left his brother to die." The words hung in the air, heavy, poisonous. It was true. 10 years before, I'd been a farmer in Missouri. My brother Samuel was 2 years younger. We'd fought over land, over a woman, over a nothing, really. The way brothers do. But one winter he got sick. Fever. I had medicine. A small bottle of quinine. Enough for one person. I kept it for myself. He died 3 days later. I told myself it was because I needed to work the farm, that his wife would be taken care of, that it was practical. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I was scared. I was scared of being sick, of dying, of the weakness that fever brought. So I let him die. I left Missouri after that, changed my name, became a wagon master, drove other people's dreams across the country, thinking maybe the miles would put enough distance between me and what I'd done. But the miles don't erase. They just stretch. The guilt stays with you. It walks beside your horse. It sits by your campfire. It waits. And now Harlan knew. I stared at him. My hand was on my rifle. I could shoot him. Say he tried to steal the supplies. Say he attacked me. The others would believe me. They needed me. But I didn't. Get out of the wagon, I said. He sneered. What are you going to do? Leave me. Go ahead. I'll catch up. And I'll tell them all. About your brother. About the kind of man you really are. He climbed out. He brushed past me, his shoulder hitting mine. Hard. A challenge. I stood there. My heart was pounding. The moon was bright. The desert was silent. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I made a decision. I called the train together. The sun was just up. The air was cold. People stood in a circle, rubbing their arms, looking at me with tired eyes. I told them Harlan had tried to steal supplies, that he was a danger to the train, that I was leaving him at the fort. Harlan stood with his arms crossed. His wife, Cora, stood beside him, her face unreadable. He's lying, Harlan said. His voice was loud, confident. He's leaving me because I know what he did. Back in Missouri, he let his own brother die. Let him die so he could keep the medicine for himself. The circle went silent. I saw the faces turn. Confusion, doubt, disgust. Ruth Thatcher was there, her hand on Margaret's shoulder. She was looking at me, not with anger, with something else. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who has seen her own darkness and knows it in another. It's true, I said. The words came out flat, dead. I let my brother die 10 years ago. I had medicine. I didn't share it. He died. Silence. That's who I am, I said, or who I was. I've been running from it ever since. Leading wagons, pretending I was different, but I'm not. I looked at Harlan. But I'm also not a thief, and you tried to steal from these people. From children. That's not about my past. That's about right now. I turned to the group. I'll take you to Oregon. I'll turn to the group. But Harlan stays here. If any of you want to stay with him, you can. No one moved. Harlan's face twisted. He looked at Cora. She looked at the ground. She didn't move to stand beside him. He cursed, spat on the ground, and he walked away. We left him there. I watched him go. A man walking toward the fort, his shadow long in the morning light, and I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not guilt, just tired. We pushed on. The trail grew harder. The mountains gave way to desert. The blue mountains of Oregon were still weeks away. The waterholes were dry. The oxen were dying. One morning, Ruth Thatcher collapsed. She was climbing down from the wagon seat, her body heavy with the child, and her legs gave out. She fell to the ground. When I got to her, her face was gray, sweat on her forehead. She was burning with fever. The baby was coming, too early, in the middle of the desert, with no doctor, no medicine. I carried her to my wagon, the only one with any privacy. Margaret followed. Her face was white, but she didn't cry. She sat beside her mother, holding her hand. "You need to get water," I told her. "Boil it. Clean cloths." She nodded, and she did it. A 7-year-old girl, fetching water, building a fire, boiling rags, doing the work of a woman twice her age. Ruth's labor was long. It lasted through the day and into the night. The other women helped, but they were weak too. Thin, tired, I stayed outside the wagon. I could hear Ruth's screams. Margaret's quiet voice telling her mother to breathe, to hold on, and in the quiet moments between screams, I prayed. I hadn't prayed since Samuel died. I'd lost the words. But that night, I found them again. "Please, not her, not the child. Take me. I'm the one who deserves it. Take me." The baby came at dawn. A boy, small, too small. He didn't cry at first, but then a sound, a thin, weak cry, like a kitten. But Ruth was bleeding. Too much. The women tried to stop it. They used rags, pressure, but the blood kept coming. It soaked through the bedding. It pooled on the floor of the wagon. I climbed in. Margaret was there, holding the baby. Her arms were trembling. Her face was smeared with tears and blood. Ruth looked at me. Her eyes were fading. The light was going out. "Elias," she whispered. Her voice was a breath. "I'm here," I said. "Ma." I said. "Ma." "Great. The baby, I'll see them through," I said. The same promise I'd made to Joseph. The one I'd meant to keep. She smiled. A small, broken smile. "I know." And then she was gone. The wagon was quiet. The women were crying. Margaret was staring at her mother's face, her own face empty, hollow. I sat there for a long time. The sun rose higher. The heat built. The world outside kept moving. But in that wagon, time stopped. I looked at the baby, at Margaret, at the woman I'd failed to save, and I understood something. All those years, the wagons, the miles, the running. I thought I was trying to outrun what I'd done to Samuel. But I wasn't. I was trying to find a way to make it right, to save someone, to prove I wasn't the man who let his brother die. But you can't earn forgiveness. You can't trade good deeds for past sins. You just carry them. And you try to be better, not for redemption, for the people who are still here. Margaret spoke. Her voice was small, but steady. She named him Samuel. I looked at her. "What?" Mama said. "If it was a boy, she wanted to name him Samuel. After your brother." The air left my lungs. I couldn't breathe. Ruth knew. She'd known about Samuel. She'd known the whole time, and she'd named her son for him. I don't know when she found out. Maybe Harlan told her. Maybe she heard the whispers. But she knew, and she chose to give that name to her child, to a child she knew she might not live to see grow. It was her gift, her forgiveness, for a sin I'd carried for 10 years. I looked at the baby. Samuel, small, red-faced. His eyes were closed. His fists were clenched. And I made a choice. The wagons had to move. We couldn't stay. The water was gone. The animals were dying. We had to reach the Columbia River. It was the only way. I had one horse, a mare. Strong. She'd carried me for 3 years. She was my partner. My condent. I gave her to Margaret. "You ride?" I said. "You hold the baby. You don't stop. You follow the river. There's a settlement. 3 days, maybe 4. She looked at me. Those 2 big eyes. "What about you?" "I'll walk," I said. She shook her head. "You'll die." I knelt down, put my hands on her shoulders. "I'll walk," I said again, "and I'll catch up. But you have to go. You have to keep Samuel alive." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. I helped her onto the horse. I wrapped the baby in a blanket. I tied him to her chest with strips of cloth. She looked down at me. "Elias, yeah, you're not the man who let his brother die." I didn't answer. I couldn't. She turned the horse, and she rode. I watched her go. Small on the horse, the baby against her chest, her wheat-colored hair blowing in the wind. She didn't look back. The train moved on. I walked. I walked for 2 days with no water. My feet bled. My throat closed. The sun burned. On the 3rd day, I fell. I lay in the dust. The heat was a weight on my chest. I thought about Samuel, about Joseph, about Ruth, about Margaret. I thought about the name, Samuel, a new beginning, a chance. And then I heard it, a sound, a horse. I opened my eyes. The sun was blinding, but I saw a shape, a horse, a small figure on its back. Margaret. She'd come back. She slid off the horse. She had a canteen. She knelt beside me, put it to my lips. Water, cool, sweet. I told you I'd catch up, I tried to say. My voice was a rasp. She didn't smile, but her eyes were soft. You're a bad liar, she said. She helped me onto the horse. The baby was crying. A good sound, a healthy sound, a healthy sound. I held the reins. She climbed up behind me, small arms wrapped around my waist. We rode. We found the settlement 2 days later, a small town on the Columbia. Log cabins, a general store, people who looked at us with tired eyes but open hands. Margaret and Samuel found a home, a family, a farmer and his wife who'd lost their own children to fever. Good people, people who had room in their hearts for 2 more. I stayed for a week, built a fence, repaired a roof, things I could do with my hands. And then I left. Margaret stood on the porch. She was holding Samuel. He was bigger now. His eyes were open, blue like his mother's. She didn't ask me to stay. She knew I couldn't. But she said one thing, the doll, she said, the one I named after you. I nodded. I buried it with Mama, so she wouldn't be alone. I felt something crack inside me, something I'd been holding together for a long time. I knelt down, one last time. You're not alone, I said. You never will be. She put her hand on my face, small, warm. Neither are you, she said. I walked away. I didn't look back, but I felt her watching. Those 2 big eyes. I went back to the trail. I led wagons for 10 more years. Never stayed in one place, never put down roots, but I carried something different now. Not the weight of a man I'd failed, but the memory of a girl who had given me a chance to be something else. Samuel grew up. I heard about him, now and then, became a doctor, worked in Portland, helped people, saved lives. Margaret married a blacksmith, had children, grandchildren. I never saw her again. But sometimes, in the quiet of the desert, when the wind is low and the stars are bright, I close my eyes and I see her. 7 years old, wheat-colored hair, a rag doll in her hands, and I hear her voice. Are you the one who makes sure we don't die? And I answer her now, the way I should have then. I'm the one who tries. The trail doesn't forgive. The miles don't erase. But people can, if you let them.